let me briefly introduce the first guest, Trisha Pritikin. While the University of Chicago is celebrating the 75th anniversary of the first chain reaction, the suffering of people in Hanford from radiation exposure is just as old. As we saw in the films today, in Hanford too, radiation-related abnormality was first detected in sheep and baby lamb, and then in humans. Trisha will give a human face to the place called Hanford, a place too often obscured by mythology. Her discussion of her involvement in civil action in Hanford, described in her forthcoming book, The Plaintiff, will provide insight into ongoing lawsuits in Japan after Fukushima.
Now I'm going to be discussing a site which was part of the Manhattan Project, and then in the Cold War it was the source of plutonium for the nuclear weapons program as well. Hanford is up in Washington State. We just have several of the Manhattan Project sites on here. I didn't want to make it too complicated. The reason that Hanford relates to the topics today is that some of the very first signs of radiation damage show up in animals and plants. And at Hanford, some of the first signs of radiation damage were malformed ewes, as Yuki said, and lambs, the mothers of which died after giving birth or trying to give birth to lambs that had legs that were fused together, no eyes, two heads, so that you sometimes see the first signs of radiation damage in the plants and animals. I'm going to talk, I need a light up here so that I can see my notes. Do you have anything that I can use to just illuminate this a little bit? My eyesight's not so good, so we're going to try to. Okay. So as I said, Hanford was the primary source of plutonium for both the Manhattan Project, and the plutonium that fueled the bomb that decimated Nagasaki was from Hanford. The process of plutonium production was very messy. It involved irradiating the fuel rods, which were clad in zirconium or aluminum. And then once the irradiation was done, the fuel rods were pushed out the back of 9 different reactors, 9 production reactors. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. All right, well illuminated, ma'am. So the fuel rods were pushed out the back of the reactors, then transported by remote controlled train to a chemical separations area. A lot of this Bo Jacobs mentioned the other day in his talk on Thursday. The whole process of plutonium production was generated both liquid waste, high-level liquid waste, which are buried in the tanks that you now hear about in the national news. We have leaky tanks at Hanford. There's 74 of them that are leaking. The medium-level waste was just dumped here and there all around the 686 square acres. And there was a lot of release of radionuclides across Washington State, into Oregon, across the Idaho Panhandle, into western Montana, and into BC. So that's a vast area that was exposed. Now, I'm going to be talking about what happened to my family because it's a pretty sad story, and it does, it'll give you an idea of what happened to many people like me. I was conceived in Richland, so I was exposed in utero to everything my mother ingested and ate, and the radioiodine, which was prevalent at Hanford and also at Chernobyl and Fukushima. Remember, these are common radionuclides, passed across the placental barrier and basically began to kill my thyroid. My thyroid actually died through an autoimmune process. And many of the people at Hanford, and I'm thinking probably also Fukushima, developed autoimmune thyroiditis, also called Hashimoto's. When you have Hashimoto's, it means your immune system is destroying your own thyroid. And you're becoming inflamed, and your body is just completely out of whack. And so we lived in this little elite town called Richland, next next to Hanford. It's sort of like Kate Brown describes Richland as Plutopia, because we had little picket fences and lawns, and it just looked like the perfect place to live, and there was hardly any crime. Yet beneath the surface, we were being irradiated over 4 decades, and nobody told us about this until 1986, when the Department of Energy finally responded to Freedom of Information Act requests, because more and more people were getting sick by then. It took that long for latency periods to pass before people started getting sick. That's important to realize, because for animals, their latency periods appears to be shorter than for humans. You're already seeing thyroid cancers amongst the children exposed to Fukushima. But some of the other diseases and things I'm going to describe in the Hanford population, you may see in the future. I hope not, but you may see in the Fukushima exposed population. I fear greatly for the future of those people. I think that we are one of the first exposed populations. Hanford's population was exposed beginning in 1944. In the end of 1944, plutonium began to be produced, and all that stuff started coming out. So if you look at what's happening to us, you get a picture of what may happen to people in Fukushima and what has happened to people in Chernobyl. Okay, I'm keeping to this time schedule here. Now, first of all, my mother and father both died of aggressive radiogenic cancers. Okay, I got a 5-minute sign back there. They say thyroid cancer is the good cancer. Not really. When it metastasizes, which it frequently does in radiation-exposed people, it's very aggressive. This cancer closed off my father's esophagus and trachea. He could not breathe, he could not eat. The metastases spread to his brain and his lungs, and he died a very painful death with a permanent tracheotomy tube sticking out of his neck. This is not a good cancer. It doesn't just cause paralysis when it metastasizes, it kills. Sometimes, not always, but it can kill. My mother, due to the stress of my father dying, I believe, her immune system was greatly compromised and she became asthmatic. She also had hypothyroidism and parathyroid disease. The parathyroids are right next to the thyroid and they control the serum calcium levels. So by the time she died of malignant melanoma, she was blind, asthmatic, hyperparathyroidism, and hypothyroidism. No one else in my entire family, outside of the people who lived in Richland, had any of these problems. Okay, now my own health problems started showing up about 2 decades after I started being exposed. That's again the latency period happening. You know, it depends on if you're a person or an animal, how long it takes. Some people develop problems faster than others. Some are more biosensitive, radiologically sensitive than others as well. I drank radioactive iodine in my baby bottle. You can switch, please, to the baby pictures. I forgot about that. These are the environmental monitoring people at Hanford. They wander around in people's yards and out in the farms, doing this and saying they were keeping everyone safe, and people, for some reason, believed them. So they were monitoring the environment, and they were recording how much stuff was out there. This is my parents and me. I lost my brother died as part of a spike of neonatal deaths in the Hanford area. He was my only sibling. And they'd lost another one right before him, so I'm the only one that survived. So now my mom's dead, my brother's dead, my dad's dead, and I started getting sick. First, I was in law school at the time, and I suffered something that seemed to be a heart attack, and they rushed me to the emergency room. They didn't get a positive result on the EKG, but they determined later that it was my esophagus contracting because it was right next to the inflamed thyroid that was now dying. So I went through panic attacks because I had autoimmune thyroiditis. So I was hyperthyroid, then I was hypothyroid, then I was hyperthyroid. This was really fun during law school. You know, it's already kind of challenging. So I made it, but it was really hard. This is just I'm trying to make sure to keep to the time here, but I'm really going to detail because I want you to know what's going to happen possibly to the Fukushima exposed folks. And I'm really sorry because I don't want it to happen, but you should look at us because we're one of the oldest exposed populations, low dose ionizing radiation, the same radionuclides that came out of Fukushima. And here we are, we're ready to be studied, we like to help, but nobody's studying us. I'm constantly fatigued, I have a great deal of body pain, which has thus far not been diagnosed. I have mild birth defects in both knees. I have some really bizarre visual issues. I have a white sheet over inside my right eye, so I look through like a white curtain. My mom had the cataracts. I had a miscarriage. One of my 2 children was born prematurely, and that same child has a congenital heart defect, and I'm actually going to Northwestern Hospital after this conference because he needs surgery or he's going to die. So this is like, this is all hitting us from all sides. This is just a nightmare, what happens to people when they're exposed to low-dose ionizing radiation. And I'm a pretty reasonable person, but this has been so hard. And then I just completed interviews with 24 Hanford Downwinders who were plaintiffs with me. And I'll tell you, I got a 2-minute warning. Okay, am I good for another 5 minutes or not? Are we okay for that? Okay. I just finished interviewing 25 of my fellow plaintiffs in Hanford Downwinder litigation. They all had thyroid cancer or thyroid nodules, and that's how they weren't kicked out of the litigation. We're using the Chernobyl studies to support the causal link between radioiodine and thyroid cancer and thyroid nodules. The other people who have all these other diseases, which are more than likely caused by low-dose ionizing radiation, often were kicked out of the litigation because there aren't studies to support the causal link. But as Alice Stewart said, if you don't look for it, you don't find it. Nobody's studying us. If you don't study us, you'll never find all these other diseases. Leukemias, autoimmune problems, lymphomas, breast cancer, colon cancer, a lot of autoimmune stuff. Okay, so I just want to finish with, there should be a slide of, that's my dad and me. And which one? There's one of the graveyard. Is it coming up?
No, I don't know.
No graveyard. Huh. There should be one with a wonderful Photoshop title that I did. I'm not really going to Sorry. Okay, well, in Richland, there's a historic graveyard, and I took Bo there because I wanted to show it to him. There's 299 neonatal and baby graves laid out, one right after the other. This is also true in Walla Walla, Washington, which was a hot spot from Hanford. And so I know there's at least 2 different places that have all these baby graves. Now, I have 4 statements here from Plutopia by Kate Brown. From 1952 to 53, the number of fetal and infant deaths in Richland increased to nearly twice the state average. Between 52 and 53, Richland and Pasco and Kennewick, which were right next to us, had a higher number of congenital malformations than the state average. And all 3 cities, especially Richland, were off the charts for percentage of deaths among infants in the population. And then by 1958, there were 4 times more fetal deaths per capita in Richland than in the rest of the state. And my brother was one of them, and I lost 2 friends to leukemia. The last thing I'll say is I work with Norma, Yuki, and Bo, and a couple other really neat people, in a new nonprofit we formed, and you just got a handout, I think. It's called Consequences of Radiation Exposure. We want to establish a museum and archives dedicated to the memory of all the people who have died from exposure to low-dose ionizing radiation, both here and globally. And we are very concerned about Fukushima. We spend a lot of our time trying to figure out what to do to help the people there because they are not in a good situation. So hopefully you can contact us if you want more information. And so thank you much, and I hope I didn't go over too much of the time. Mary's next, so I will turn this off. Thank you. I think I turned it off.
Thank you very much. I just want... I just wanted to remind you that both speakers' bios are found in program, so please refer to that. And also, both of them, as Norma noted earlier, they are going to join the panel at 4 o'clock Q&A session. So let me now turn to Mary Olson. In 2016, as her bio noted, Mary made a 5-week trip to Japan, sharing her research about gender and radiation effects with the people there. Following one of her talks in Fukushima, one woman approached Mary and said, "This was the first time that someone has told us about the danger of radiation. It had been 5 years since the accident, but this was the reality of Fukushima." As Dr. Olsen's testimony will reveal, our knowledge of the effects of radiation on the human body remains incomplete. So we look forward to her valuable insights into the matter. Let us welcome Mary Olson. Computer.
I'm sorry. I want to say I was deeply honored to spend 5 weeks in Japan and to see some of the outstanding, incredibly courageous people who live and are continuing to engage with the challenges in Fukushima Prefecture in the film that we all saw together. Some of those people were part of the team that gave me a week of experience in prefecture and amongst the people who are living there, and then the additional 4 weeks in Japan, I met many people who had relocated and were no longer living in the prefecture. But since I have 5 minutes, I am not going to be talking about that trip, and I am going to direct you to the handout and the URL at the bottom, because I'm going to give a very lasered version of this talk, which I will do even if we don't have the technology. If I can see that, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
But do they see it?
No, they don't.
Okay.
Light.
I can do without the lights.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, so acknowledging my sister Lauren's original art piece there, I use this title. It is what it is. Gender Matters in the Atomic Age. And after 27 years on radioactive waste policy, gender and radiation impact is my new project. This is not a map of the fallout. Oh, it didn't advance, guys. All right, so what else do I have to say?
Close the other one.
So there's going to be a map
So
of
close
the
that one.
2,000 nuclear explosions that have already occurred on our planet. We didn't have a full-scale nuclear war, but we've contaminated our planet from more than 2,000 detonations. So that doesn't include the North Korean batch that have been added on top. We also have 403 operable nuclear power plants splitting atoms 24/7 worldwide. Those are the ones that are online today. They are making new radioactivity. We okay? Got it? Okay. Now we have no image. Okay.
There we go. Okay. I'm sorry.
Please, monitor that.
I don't know.
And when the radioactivity at a nuclear power plant leaves the site, when a nuclear weapon is detonated, the radioactivity is invisible. I was really moved by the autoradiographs, as we call them in the lab, that were presented in the film. I do think it's tremendously important that people can see radiation in that case. But in our ordinary lives, it remains invisible. Okay, let's see if we can do this now. Yay! Yay! Go technology, go women, yes, it's all good. Okay, this is not the fallout. This is relative numbers of detonations. So a Japanese man named Isao Hashimoto lets me use this picture. He created a film. These are the 403. I know the slide says 390, but there are actually today 403 operable reactors worldwide. In both cases, radioactivity is invisible, but we can see the damage that it does. And I agree that genes are not the only thing damaged, but you can see the damage to these genes. However, most of the impact of radiation on our human species is also invisible because the radiation regulators base their regulations solely on information about the adult male body. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Department of Energy regulations state down in the footnotes that they use reference man. The official definition or case of a reference man fits a military or paramilitary male, 20 to 30 years old, 154 pounds, 5 foot 7 inches tall, race defined as white, lifestyle defined as Northern European or North American. In 2010, a woman asked me if radiation is more harmful to women. I'd been almost 20 years in my job and I did not have an answer. Then TEPCO's reactors at Fukushima Daiichi melted down, and that question became really very urgent to me. I was mentored by Dr. Rosalie Bertel, and she directed me to this blue report. In the vernacular, we call it BEER 7, the Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation number 7, which contains actual tables of data, 60 years of cancer data from the A-bomb survivors, was published in that report. Now, the lifespan study tracks the excess cancers from the quick pulse of gamma and neutron radiation that happened when the US attacked with nuclear bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. These were unspeakably horrific acts of war. I, for one, deeply regret that my government chose to use the first nuclear weapons on cities full of people. I wish it had never happened. The lifespan data is used widely, including by me, but that does not make it right. As has been said, cancer is not the only consequence of radiation exposure, but it is the most studied, and it is what is studied in the lifespan report. And when DNA impacts our cells, we must always affirm that our bodies have amazing repair mechanisms. Not every exposure results in illness. But if the repair is not complete or results in abnormal cells, they may sit in our body for years, even decades, the latency period, before we become sick. There is no way to predict which exposure will result in cancer. And even a tiny exposure you can't measure may result in cancer. And that is why radiation impact is studied in large groups to see patterns. The only way to look at age and gender, per the question, was to look at a data set that includes both genders and all ages, thus the lifespan group. We know already that radiation impacts children more than adults, but what we did not know, I see, but help me. That's the 2-minute marker, but we had a kerfuffle, so I'm trying to get there, all right? So what we did not know, and you can't see by going to the BEER 7 report yourself without spending some time, as I did, resolving the numbers to simple ratios, is the large tie of gender to the outcome of radiation exposure. Amongst the youngest cohort, the people who were in 1945, 5 years or younger, for every boy that got cancer at some point, these are not childhood cancers, these are over their lifetimes, for every boy that got cancer, 2 girls got cancer. This is the same information in graphic form. The age of exposure, they were in 1945, is across the bottom. Up the side is 60 years of cancer data reported. We do not show the age the cancer came, just how old they were when exposed. Pink line is female, blue line is males. You can see there's a difference across the entire lifespan, but it is greatest in the young children, where it is about 100% difference, a doubling. Now I've added lines to compare now to the adult male, which underpins the reference man. So people who were exposed, little girls exposed, 10 times more impact than the reference man would show or predict. Little boys, 5 times more. And I want you to see it, like the autoradiograph, see it. These are large groups of people. For every 1 adult male, 10 females in their adulthoods are walking around with illness. Many people I've met who are regulators think that little girls are a subpopulation. We are not. We are an inextricable link in the human life cycle. And even when you look at adults, this one changes my behavior in the field. Arnie Gunderson went off with Yoichi and others to collect samples, and I stayed inside with the women because for every 2 men who were exposed in adulthood and died of cancer, 3 women died of cancer in the lifespan study. So the blue circle is the only thing regulators see. The information and the data about the adult male is the only thing presented. Many of you may think that children are protected and are not exposed, and this would be a thing that only happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But this is fallout patterns to children in their milk drinking from the Nevada test site over a number of years compiled. I don't have time to explain it, but those are radiation exposure rates to children in the United States. And it's been 1 half-life of cesium, yay, 137, that Chernobyl did in a 10-day period. 1 reactor did that to Eurasia in 10 days. There were children there then. They are adults now. They are having children. There are children there now. So why is gender? Why girls so much more than boys? This is a question that hasn't even been asked by our institutions, let alone answered. And it's in our hands. We should do our best. So thank you, Norma, and everyone who organized this event.